Hello, I'm Judy Mudd, and the last video I did was about using other colors in the mixing of your greens to make them more interesting and lively and more realistic. The colors I used were ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, and turquoise light, and I mixed those four blues with quinacridone gold, a aurelin, and yellow ochre to mix the greens. Then in addition to those, I added dioxazine violet, probably some magenta, and a cobalt violet light, which is a favorite of mine in my paintings. This time, on this video, I want to show you how I actually apply the paint to make these trees. And I think I showed you this example last time of how I used it in this painting. Now I want to show you the reference. Now this is the photo. I did paint this scene in plein air, but this photo is a really good example of how to see the right color mixes when you apply them to your paintings. And you can see in this photo that everywhere the sun is hitting the surface, whether it's the grass or the trees, it's a much more warm or yellow tone of green. Where it's in shadow, it's a much cooler green. So, and the same thing goes for the trees over here. You can see on these edges, the perimeter, where the sunlight is hitting, it's a much warmer green. It has a lot of yellow added to it. But when you go further into the recesses of the tree, it turns cooler, has more blue to it, sometimes even a little purple, especially in the areas where the tree trunks are. And so there's a variety of colors in here. Now, on trees, it's just like when you're painting hair on a portrait. The most texture that you see is on the perimeter of the tree. The light is behind it, and you can actually see the texture of the tree on the perimeter. Now, this is a good example over here with this one in the shade. You can see so much more texture on the edge than you can in the center of the tree. So that's how I paint it. I start at the perimeter, and because it's in sunlight, I'll add more warmth on this side. As I go into the recesses of the tree, I'll add cooler colors, maybe even come back and add more warms again, and then cools again. And that's how I'll paint it. So let me show you how I actually apply the paint. Again, here are the colors. I put this on a smaller palette so you could see it. I've got ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, turquoise light. This is a quinacridone gold, aurelin yellow, which is a cooler yellow than the gold, and this is cobalt violet light. It's a Holbein product. That's probably the only one that I like that's the cobalt violet light is by Holbein. And then this is dioxazine violet. So let's start. Take this, move it over a bit. So in this, I'm using this as an example just to show me the light patterns. But I'm going to paint just any tree. So I'll start on the lightest side, and I try to mix as much as I can on the paper rather than on the palette. So I'm going to pick up my warmest gold, which is the quinacridone gold. New Gamboge would work just as well. It's a very warm yellow. And I'll do the perimeter of the tree. And this is where the texture is. This is where all those little patterns we see on the tree are. So I'll just do a random kind of look. I want him to look irregular. I don't want him to be a nice little neat tree. I want him to have a little character. So I put a little gold out there on the perimeter. And then I clean my brush and rinse it and wipe it off. And I'm going to pick up a little blue so I can make that green. And I can change it a little bit. I think I like to have a little cerulean out here. And if I get too much and I think it needs to go a little warmer, then I just add a little more gold to it while it's still wet. Okay, so as it turns, I'll make sure that's good, some good shapes to it. As it turns into the tree and then we get into the recesses, when I start adding some darker colors. Here's ultramarine blue, Here's some dioxazine violet. I'm going to rinse my brush. Now, it may be that it's going to turn right out into the sunlight again, so I may go back and add a little more quinacridone gold here, just in a few spots where it's hitting the sun again, or I should say the sun is hitting it again. And again, I take some blues, mix those in there. While it's still wet, you can play with it. I may add a little more gold in here because I think there should be some in there, just for variety. And again, as it's going into the recesses of the tree, we'll add some darks. And we might put a little bit of this cobalt violet light. Certainly makes a more interesting tree, doesn't it? A cooler yellow even could work in here, where it's coming back out. It's a little too perfect of a tree, but you get the idea what I'm doing here. And then back here in this really far away area where it's really not hitting the light, then I'll go even deeper. And it's really in the shaded side. You can see by adding the dark side of the tree, the darkest darks, makes those lightest areas pop. Now if I want to, I could probably go ahead and add a tree trunk on this guy using some of the mixes that I've got here. That's not a very pretty tree trunk, but I'm pretty stuck with it now. So I'll just try to make, he's looking a little too fat. But remember, when you get to the base of the tree, it's not all nice and perfectly sitting on a top of the grass. It's jagged edged. It's not not straight across at the bottom. Let's put some shading on this side of the tree trunk even, so it really looks like it's in the shade over here. Okay, so I'm going to pretend now that there's another tree right here beside it. Remember, a shadow is strongest next to the object that it's casting the shadow in the first place, and then as it gets away from it, it starts to lighten up. But say there's another tree on this side over here, then we'll just do the same thing. We'll add some more lights where it's being struck by the light, and then we'll go into our darks, our darker colors. Let's go back with the cerulean. Let's keep it relatively light yet. Then we'll go into cobalt. And what else? Let's go do a little purple in here. A little dioxazine violet. These trees are merging here. And let's do another round of color. It's hitting the light again. And it's going back into the dark side, the shaded side. Let's put a tree trunk down here. Again, on the side that's away from the sunlight, it's going to be even darker, and same way on the tree trunk, it's going to be even darker. It's going to have a shadow down here going. be softened as it goes away because it's going to be softened as it gets away from the tree. And also we can deepen this side even further. You can also go in, now that this should be close to being dry, it's still pretty damp, so it'll probably make little tiny blossoms on it, but let me show you, you can go in and add some more texture to it. Let's put some blues in here on top of what you've already laid down. You can add a few more little patterns of leaves and textures in here, especially on the perimeter, and then of course the darker areas can go darker, just more solid looking. In the little sky holes you can put a limb going through them. This one back here I would probably soften a few of these. You can see by softening an edge or two it actually sits into the background better. A little texture added. And I use my finger a lot too. You get a texture with your finger that you don't get with a brush. It's a little uneven. This is still a little too damp to do much with it, but you get the idea of seeing what I've done over here. And just rub some texture in there. I could actually go even darker, another step darker. Let's go even darker down here at the base. You can see by adding the darks on here makes the lights more pronounced and really pop. More purple over here. Still pretty wet, but I think it'll make it look better if I add some more. And you can add some texture at the base if you want. Again, while I'm using my finger, just show some grasses down there. Just really pulling some paint out with my finger that's already down there and adding a few grasses there. So that can give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about as far as putting the lights on the light where the sun is hitting the most. Using the warmer colors, the warm yellows, and making those lighter greens, warmer greens, and going into cooler, going into much cooler, where it's really deep in the shade. And then again, in the next trees, the same thing. If it's out in the sunlight, then add your yellows, and then go into your deeper colors. Thanks for watching.